Welcome to part 2 on my series about chariots. This is the really fun part, the practical usage of chariots. If you missed the first part, there will be a link down in the description to it. So, let's start by making a simple list of what people used chariots for. Firstly, they used them for transporting troops in combat. This is by far the rarest usage of them. Second, as a command vehicle. This is basically takes the place of having your general ride around on a horse so he can see what's going on. This is probably the second least common, but it's kind of hard to tell exactly who was using it specifically for that because a lot of nobility rolled around in these, and by extension the nobility are usually the ones in charge in combat. Third, as shock cavalry. This isn't particularly common either, for fairly obvious reasons that we're going to get into later. Fourth, and this is by far the most common usage of a chariot, as a drive-by facilitator, aka a mobile weapons platform. So we'll start with that one. That's the most common. And it's the one most people see, because you see Egyptians in movies riding around in chariots just shooting arrows at people. Or you see Hittites doing it, or you see basically anybody in a chariot is probably got a bow in their hands and they're probably shooting at someone. That's what chariots were designed for. And it is what they are best at, because honestly they provide a more stable firing platform than conventional cavalry, because you don't have to drive while you're shooting. You can just pay attention to shooting. And while you're standing flat on something instead of standing up in a saddle. Basically, if you didn't have stirrups, it's pretty much impossible to do ranged combat from a horse. That's an entirely other video. So, drive-bys were the big thing with chariots. Most of the time, the chariots would drive up, pretty much whip a Yui right before the enemy lines, about 30-40 yards away, send a hail of arrows into them as fast as they possibly could while turning, and then get the hell out of there before you can get shot to pieces. Because that's a big problem chariots have. It looks like there's a lot of cover in there. There really isn't. There's not a whole lot on a chariot, specifically because they're designed to be light, and horses don't have any real protection for the same reason. They're not strong enough to go running around with all that tack on. Now, we move to the second primary usage of chariots, as that of shock cavalry. Honestly, you'd think running people over with chariots is like a no-brainer. It's like, wow, I have 2 horses and a cart. I'll just put some, spinning blades on the wheels. I'll just run people over. Okay. The Persians had that idea. It's called a scythed chariot. Apparently it worked fairly well. There's a big problem. You're in a cart. Okay? Now, great things about carts are they have beautiful momentum once you get going. The other problem is it's being pulled by horses. Horses don't like running into things. They tend to try to run around things, because that's why would you want to run into something? Now, you could, of course, specifically train it to do this, but you have 2 horses now, at a minimum. I've never seen a war chariot that only uses 1 horse. So you have 2 horses, at minimum, that are going to try to run into something. Horses don't like stepping on people. They purposefully avoid stepping on things, just no matter what it is. They try to step on flat ground whenever possible. Same as you or I do. Don't purposely step on people. They purposely step over bodies, even. The next problem is you think you're going real fast, and you are. You're going as fast as the horse can gallop. But honestly, it's really easy to slow a chariot down. And you don't want to be that close to the enemy, because a big flaw in chariots are you have wheels. And if someone whips a spear through one of your wheels, it's going to suck. Either it's going to suddenly prevent your wheel from spinning, and then it'll start dragging on the ground, and it's going to cause massive drag and slow you down, and then people will jump on your chariots and stab you to death. Or, and probably the more realistic version, it's going to snap one of your spokes. And now you have the medieval equivalent of a flat tire. This is kind of why it's why tanks use treads, actually. Can't get a flat tread. You can break other stuff, but that's not the point. Wheels need that to work. Once they go flat, they don't work properly, especially metal wheels like that. You lose that spoke, and the bronze on the wheel will deform. So this is most likely why shock cavalry methods of chariots weren't used all that much. And I'll be honest, it's probably why Darius lost to Alexander, not playing to chariot strengths. Now the next version is the mobile command vehicle, and I think to an extent everyone used them this way, but it was a little less, I guess, on the nose, a little less called out as such. The Chinese did, and they specifically stated that's what they were used for, because they did use them exclusively for that for some time. And it makes sense. You have a nice little cart that can move reasonably quickly, and you can just have nice little storage spaces on it to put paper, seals, all sorts of little knickknacks you might need when doing varying general stuff. Like signing orders and whatnot. Then you can pour some wax on there and click, off you go. So I can see that. It also gives you a better view of the battlefield because you're riding on a chariot. And especially when you look at Chinese chariots in particular, they seem to ride a little high. This is because I have found out that Chinese chariots have a lot of spokes. They have 20 plus spokes. Their wheels are freaking huge on some of these carts. And I'm assuming it's so you can just stand up on the back and see over absolutely everybody. Which makes sense, actually. It's a great ability to have. That's why flying is so amazing as far as being a general is concerned. If you can actually fly or be that high above your troops and not be inconvenienced, do it every single time. The last version of a chariot is the one that is least used. The troop transport. As far as I'm aware, only the Celts did this. Which makes sense when you actually look at their chariot. It's pretty much a board with some wicker in between, stuck on some wheels with some small railings to hold onto. That's it. And the Celts didn't seem to use bows on their chariots. They seemed to prefer throwing javelins at people. So they would ride around on there. One of their buddies would be driving. A couple of guys would be standing in the back. They'd whip a few javelins at you. Then they'd grab their shields and their spears, or swords, or axes, or whatever they were using, and jump off the back and go fight some guys on foot for a while. And if everything looked bad, they would call their buddies over. They'd all jump in the chariot and drive off, presumably flipping you the bird as they did so. It's a pretty good idea, actually. And I can see why they did it, especially in the smaller scale type of fights. In a larger scale battle, it's only so useful, though I gotta say the ability to move your troops rapidly from point A to point B is really helpful. Though I can understand not wanting to dedicate people and resources to it when you could just have conventional shock cavalry or something. But it was a pretty solid use, and it worked for a while. It's why the British people of the British Isles used it probably for as long as they did, and before conventional cavalry took over. And in a way, that concept got brought back into the Napoleonic era with dragoons, where you ride around and then dismount and then shoot people. There's a very long span of time where that wasn't going on. Probably because horses were really expensive. Well, that'll do it for this video. Be sure to tune in for when I have part 3, which is me wildly speculating about fun random uses for chariots in fantasy and other contexts.